The horror game Routine begins by defining its title, an ongoing cycle of natural actions and patterns. It's been a couple of weeks since I beat the game, and I still don't know why this game is called that or why this definition is important to its narrative. It haunts me. But because of that, and because the game is just all around fantastic, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Without spoiling anything major just yet, Routine is a game that tells its story on the moon. You wake up in Union Plaza, a lunar resort. There is a mall, an arcade, a hotel, a sassy little receptionist bot. And what I find unique about this game is how much it feels like an old sci-fi movie, and much of this is achieved by Routine's use of color. I love the horror genre, but Dead Space and Resi and Silent Hill and so many others, despite being my darlings, all kind of like to sit in this dark, neutral, dying, rusty color palette, and only break that rule when they use yellow to draw your attention to something you can interact with, or just slap you with red to stress you out. But Routine revels in a bouquet of colors, including red. You stumble upon a nursery area bathing in relaxing blues. The arcade entrance hums pink neon to make the area feel distinct as you run from danger. You run and hide behind wall panels that are a sickly yellow. The DNA of this game is written in the films that influenced it. Aaron Foster, one of the developers, has pointed out many times in interviews that the game is less inspired by games and more so film. Pictures like The Shining, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Alien. And Alien in particular is a movie that I find has a lot of parallels with Routine, outside of its use in color. In the 1979 film, there are allegories to birth throughout the entire thing. When they undock from the Nostromo, we hear over the radio,
"Umbilicus clear."
The ship's central operating AI is called Mother. After the xenomorph erupts from Kane's chest, Ash refers to it as
Kane's son.
And Routine has much of the same from a naming standpoint. You find these tapes and documents where researchers who were on the moon base find a cave that they call the Canal, a strange place that they all seem to be called to. There are lunar quakes referred to in reports as contractions. Perhaps something disturbing comes out of the canal. Historically speaking, the moon itself, you could make the argument, is analogous to a woman's menstrual cycle. Bloodborne certainly does. The events of the game revolve around what the moon is currently doing. This game is riddled with womb horror. Women give birth to these nightmarish beasts. Queen Annalise asks you to gather her blood dregs so that she can one day bear the child of blood. And is that jizz inside the blood? You fight an abandoned eldritch child that fights with what I can only describe as a placenta yo-yo. The scariest thing in Luigi's mansion is a giant ghost baby that cries like this. You know what's crazy is, despite all the cosmically disturbing things I want to talk about today, somehow this is the thing that freaks me out the most. I don't know why. Birth and babies and pregnancy are shockingly common in horror, actually, and I've only recently started to wonder why that is. Why decide to take something as sacred and innocent as a new life and transmogrify it into something dark and terrifying? The answer, of course, entirely depends on the story. If you've played Mouthwashing, for example, you know exactly why it is used and why it's important that it be portrayed as feverish and tormenting as it is to Jimmy. If you've seen Rosemary's Baby, you'll know how central pregnancy and being someone with a womb are to the themes of control and societal expectations that the movie is trying to convey. Quite often, this trope is there to shed light on the very harsh realities that people born with a womb in this world face. Horror is exactly the genre for it, and I think it would be extremely disrespectful if I broached this topic without first acknowledging that. Though, what I'd like to talk about today is a little less social and a bit more cosmic in nature. These stories are a particular brand of fiction that do often weave themselves in and out of the pregnancy theme, and specifically revolves around our place as mortal beings, products of evolution, creatures that are both bound to die but also continue on because of our ability to reproduce. These are stories that I would consider creation horror. What happens when you disturb life's intended cycle for personal gain? What happens when you dissect a god? What happens when you literally try to crawl back into Mother Nature's womb? What on earth does any of that mean? What on moon does it mean? Let's find out together. Oh, and there will be spoilers for a handful of things with varying degrees of severity, but there will be well-marked timestamps for each of them. So, without further ado, let's talk about the horror of being born. Am I right? So there's this part in Dead Space 2 where you stumble upon a daycare. It's quiet, no necromorphs yet. The game filters you down a hallway and then you see this. Now that is obviously a bummer, but it is a smart tutorial. It's Dead Space's way of telling you, hey, the babies explode, keep your distance. It adds to the spooks, and it's also much more fair than just dropping a baby bomb on your face and then letting you deal with the consequences blindly. But this scene has always lingered with me like a ghost. Not because the baby is creepy, but because what was the mother thinking? Why invite this thing into your arms? The easy answer is, like Isaac sometimes does when he sees his dead girlfriend, she was hallucinating. Because of the marker's effects, she didn't see a mutated bag of meat, she saw her child. But the true horror of this moment to me is that that statement can be true even if she wasn't hallucinating. How many times in horror have you seen this? Wait, don't shoot! That's still Timmy! This is a setup that I find deeply unsettling. Like, I won't spoil too many details, but that part in Resi 9 recently, or in The Last of Us when Sam wonders if infected people are still in there somehow, or in Heavenly Delusion when this lady is convinced that this monster is actually her son. It doesn't matter if the mother was hallucinating. If she knew this was her baby, she could have fully believed that it wasn't going to hurt her, or even if it did, maybe she didn't care. Maybe it was more important to comfort it in its final moments. This right here often serves as a big reason people are stupid in horror movies, because of that nagging human flaw that we care, that we have empathy for others. Think of Ripley going back for Jonesy in Alien, or Ripley going back for Newt in Aliens. Caring is an OSHA violation.
Get away from her, you bitch!
And this is true not just for children and pets, mind you. How many times in life have you held onto a toxic relationship or bent over backwards for someone that only ever hurt you? Just because someone is a monster, either literally in fiction or metaphorically in real life, doesn't always stop us from trying to save them. And I think that's the real horror here. If you've seen this episode of Frieren, you know how fiction can ensnare people with their own parental warmth. The village wants to protect this demon girl because, after all, she's only a child. But an infant and all of its innocence begs to be protected and activates something in all of us that can be tragically betrayed.
Mommy, please.
Explain. Why would you call out to a mother you've never known?
That word stops humans. It keeps them from murdering us. Isn't that magical?
There is a chapter in the horror manga Uzumaki where a doctor proclaims, "Cuteness is common to all baby mammals. It is a weapon used by infant children to get adults' attention because they need us to survive." Which, survey says, is true. Science actually does back this up. Calling it a weapon is a bit twisted, but in this chapter's context, it is eerily appropriate. Kirie Goshima is checking in on her cousin Keiko in the hospital. Keiko is pregnant, you see, and Kirie is concerned because she knows something that doctors and nurses don't. Keiko has been drinking human blood, just like all of the other pregnant ladies currently admitted. But of course, how could anyone believe such a ridiculous accusation? These are all soon-to-be mothers. That's insane. Keiko finally gives birth and, okay, yeah, little baby Makio is adorable. The sweetest baby Kirie has ever seen. In fact, all of them are perfect little angels. Why are their bellies bloating like that? Why is it not bothering anyone else? Why do the babies only cry when Kirie calls attention to it? Later on, Kirie eventually overhears the babies somehow chatting amongst themselves. It's so cold here. I want to go back. Can we really go back? The womb is the best. I want to go back to the womb. If he took us out, he can put us back in. Right now, Makio is being returned. I hope my return will come soon. Kirie thinks she's losing her mind. She must be saying things right. After all, none of that made sense. Surely the babies aren't. Kirie stumbles into the OR where she finds the doctor, who then makes that assertion about a baby's cuteness. He also points out that eventually a child grows up and becomes independent. But not these babies. Not only do they not want to be independent, they want to be fetuses forever. They are physically regrowing their umbilical cords, attempting to literally reverse the birthing process. And Makio is the first successful procedure. Kirie lumbers past the doctor and opens the door to discover... Look man, I put a trigger warning at the beginning. This chapter latches onto something primal in our minds, I reckon. Murderers and ghosts and aliens and politicians, we all registered these as threats, but this rebellion against the natural order is difficult for us to process. What is so dynamically disturbing about the baby's motivation? They want to go back into their mothers. They want to physically reunite with their creators. It's an abnormal refusal of growth and mortality. It is, in some ways, an attempt at godhood. If you never leave the womb, you are not subjected to the ravages of humanity. And that might seem like a bit of an odd observation on my part, but just walk with me on this. The Prometheus is a ship that is in transit to LV-223, a planet 39 light years from Earth. Now, the reason that the Prometheus is traveling all this way is due to these cave paintings. Across different cultures and different eras all across the planet, people that couldn't have known about each other, they all have this commonality. This exact constellation and a giant being that is pointing toward them. Doctors Shaw and Holloway believe that these giants are our genetic creators. They call them the engineers.
They engineered us.
And Peter Wayland, a quadruple zillionaire that is like 187 years old. My god, hair and makeup make Guy Pearce look ancient. Why didn't they just cast an actual old guy? Mr. Wayland is funding the whole thing, even though by the time they all watch this recording, he will have been long dead. But like Uzumaki, the motivations here are clear. Return to our creators. Though for most of the crew, it's less about crawling back inside of them and more about answers to cosmic questions. Why were we created? And they make progress on this, by the way. Upon landing, they find a massive structure containing a corpse of one of the engineers. They check its DNA, and it matches ours. But unfortunately, this is not all they find here. Much like in Uzumaki, going backwards only leads to ruin. The engineers seem to have been crafting some kind of bioweapon, and once it poisons the crew, it makes quick work of them. Holloway is infected and quickly loses his mind, leaving the captain no choice but to incinerate him lest he bring the infection on the ship. These two are attacked by some strange creature in the weapons room. Shaw medically cannot have children, but then finds out she is impossibly pregnant. Then she connects the dots. Oh, her and Holloway were intimate before they knew he was infected. She is now carrying something inside of her. And in what is probably one of the most Daryl did this the entire time he watched it scenes of all time, she finds a way to get it out of there and survive. The amniotic pandemonium here is reminiscent of Bloodborne. Beasts and eldritch horrors and skeletal aberrations roam the moonlit streets here in the Nightmare, a sort of purgatory that the gods have created to punish the hunters and scholars for their actions in the waking world. You see, according to the lore, which I definitely figured out all on my own and didn't check the internet to piece together, the Nightmare began because of multiple instances of the people of this world tampering with the divine. One of the biggest examples of this is what the Healing Church of Bergenworth did to the god Kos. As the story goes, Kos, what Bloodborne refers to as one of the Great Ones, has washed up on the beach just outside of a fishing hamlet. Her presence changed the villagers, mutating them in ways that humans have never seen. The church, in their maddening pursuit of cosmic knowledge, didn't help her, but instead defiled her. They dissected and violated her, looking for answers. Lady Maria, one of the first hunters, took part in this, and it's implied that not only did she assist in Cass's mutilation, but also oversaw cruel experiments on the affected villagers. Sickened with her actions, at some point she took her own life and awakened in the nightmare with the scholars, all damned to wander here for their perverse actions.
A corpse should be left well alone.
It is a tragedy that is illustrated beautifully when you come across Maria's spirit in the nightmare itself.
Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly.
Maria knows all too well what becomes of those who go seeking answers from the divine, and so she guards the entrance to the fishing hamlet feverishly, perhaps trying to eternally repent for her mistakes. Should you beat her and go find Cass, you will be met with Cass's sorrowful orphan, a higher being that, despite its godhood, is just as terrified and cold as a newborn infant. A child suffers because of humanity's obsession with immortality. And the same is true of Prometheus. The actual mission of the expedition is less to find out why we were created, and more so to understand how we can be cured from death. Mr. Wayland is still very much alive. He was transported here in cryosleep and intends to meet the engineers to understand how to become immortal. The old man considers David, the synthetic human aboard the ship, his own son because David is learning the engineer's language in order to get answers. David is his conduit for that ancient knowledge, which drives a wedge between Wayland and his actual daughter, Captain Vickers, who is kind of useless in his selfish endeavor. And when it's revealed that this is Wayland's plan, you might realize how the ship's name foreshadows this.
The Titan, Prometheus, wanted to give mankind equal footing with the gods. For that, he was cast from Olympus.
And it's clear this motivation is shared by the Healing Church as well. This is all in an effort to achieve godhood and reverse the natural order, which is why pregnancy is such a common theme in these stories, because it's not just the relationship between mothers and children that's being explored here, it's gods and their creations. It's quite interesting to me how David, the synthetic human, is portrayed in this film. He spends years religiously consuming human-made art, literature, music, movies, and then reciting it back to himself until it's perfect.
The trick, William Potter, is not minding that it hurts.
Is not minding that it hurts.
Even in how he prepares his hair, you can see how he desperately wants to be human, which to him, since we created him, would be achieving godhood. We are the answer to all of his questions about his own existence. And in one of the most interesting scenes of the film, he gently asks Holloway what they hope to accomplish by finding the engineers. Holloway responds to find out why they made humanity in the first place, but then David asks, "Why do you think your people made me?"
We made you because we could.
Holloway is a tool. But in a particularly profound clapback, David asks,
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator?
It's reminiscent of a conversation you can have with the doll in Bloodborne. She has heard about the gods and their love.
But do the gods love their creations? I am a doll created by you humans. Would you ever think to love me?
To me, these interactions are a harrowing reminder that we are simply a step in a cosmic cycle of creation. Who created us? Well, that answer, whether you take the religious or the scientific approach, is always something else. A previous genome, a god, a mother. What will come from us? Another species, another intelligence, a child. We are part of an endless cycle that pushes us ever forward, and in all of these stories, the horror pollinates when we try to negate that order, when we try to place our own interest and our own desire to ascend to a previous state over playing our part in the next one. Wayland prioritizing David and his immortality over his own daughter. The healing church prioritizing the divine over actual healing for people in need. The babies refusing to grow and instead wanting to become one with their mothers again. It is all a refusal to take part in the cycle of life. And that is a bit difficult to relate to, isn't it? Sure, I think we all want concrete answers about our own place in the universe. We are all after weapons to fight back against our own existential dread. Perhaps, if we really try to relate them to ourselves, these stories portray the madness of being so terrified of death that we forget to live. But our next example, even more so than these, reminds us who else suffers at the hands of our fear. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 takes place in a world that is unnatural based on our understanding of the human growth cycle. Children here begin their lives in early adolescence, live 10 years as they fight in a never-ending war, and then move on from this world in a ritual called homecoming, assuming they survive the war. And the game does a brilliant job of pretending like this is normal for a good chunk of the first act. It is only we, the audience, that go, wait, where are these kids' parents? And the flames of our suspicion are only fanned by the gang's reaction to seeing a middle-aged person for the first time.
His skin's all wrinkled.
Yeah.
It's called getting old, this.
They don't even refer to this guy as old because they don't have a word for it. You see, in Xenoblade 3, unlike our previous examples, the villains have in fact achieved godhood, and this is what it looks like. Countless generations of youth wage war against one another, and that violence only fuels the immortality of a cult called Mobius, a small group of individuals that refuse to adhere to aging. This is done through JRPG shenanigans by continually sapping the next generation of their youth and effectively living forever. The story follows our motley crew of kiddos who have all been granted the power of Oroboros, these powerful forms that can stand up to the members of Mobius. And when you look at the naming symbolism here, you get a pretty clear reference to this cycle idea I'm trying to paint a picture of. A Mobius strip is a seemingly impossible little puzzle of a shape. If you trace one side of it and follow, somehow it'll reach both sides in an infinite loop, which here symbolizes the never-ending nature of these people's lifespans. But the Oroboros is a symbol dating all the way back to ancient Egypt of a snake consuming its own tail, signifying the natural beginning and end of life, shedding of skin, birth and rebirth, mothers and children, evolution. Every ending is a new beginning. This game is the struggle between the next generation inheriting the world and the previous one refusing to leave, between the snake's head and its tail. And Xenoblade makes this point both metaphorically and physically. When it's revealed that all along our heroes have been clones, you realize how Mobius has literally erased motherhood to destroy the cycle. One of my favorite scenes in this game is when the crew arrives at this small resistance village and finds out what babies are. Watching these kids discover what nature is actually like, what falling in love and creating a life and growing old together looks like, is one of the most heartwarming moments of the story.
All right then, lads and lasses. Who wants to know how babies are made?
It's a reminder of the simple beauty of the natural order, that while aging and loss is scary, it's the tiny things like watching our children play together that makes us feel a little less small in the universe. The magnificent comfort of knowing that we are part of something larger than ourselves. When we interrupt that something, when we prioritize ourselves over our place in that cycle, this is what leads to annihilation, and it is always the next generation that suffers. The orphan, Wayland's daughter, the children these babies will never grow up to have, the youth of Ionos. In Xenoblade, the natural course of life, the concept of cyclical Oroboros, is portrayed as the purest expression of the soul, and only destruction comes from resisting it. But what happens when a story insists that destruction is inseparable from creation? One of my favorite scenes in the film Annihilation is a flashback. Lena and Kane are laying in bed looking at the moon during the day. Lena remarks how it being visible in daylight is almost like God made a mistake. Kane takes offense to this. God doesn't make mistakes, he affirms.
Pretty sure he does.
But Lena, as a biologist, has a convincing counter-argument.
Take a cell, circumvent the Hayflick limit, prevent senescence. The cell doesn't grow old, it becomes immortal. Keeps dividing, doesn't die. We see aging as a natural process, but it's actually a fault in our genes.
This part tells you a lot about Lena. She is very empirical, and as someone who is currently researching cancer, it's hard for her not to feel like humanity is actively flawed. The Hayflick limit she's referring to, if you don't know, is the finite number of times your cells divide. Is what causes us to age and eventually pass away. Bypassing the Hayflick limit would, in a way, be tampering with the divine and breaking the cycle of life. No more death, at least of natural causes. But since Lena can't do that, she has an entirely different response. Instead of reversing the cycle, she tries to speed it up. Here's what I mean. Annihilation follows an ecological phenomena called the shimmer. People go in, they do not come out. Signals and phone calls and radio waves do not pass through it correctly. We do not know what the fuck is going on in this thing, but it is getting bigger, and we, the audience, travel with this team of women as they attempt to go get some answers. Critically, they all fully understand that this could be a one-way ticket, and while they don't really talk about it, it's something that looms over the narrative. In some way, these women have all lost something. Dr. Ventress has terminal cancer. Shepard has lost her daughter. Lena is dealing with the guilt of cheating on a husband that she thought was killed in active duty, only to find out that he is still alive. These ladies have a different outlook than Mr. Wayland and the Healing Church and Mobius. They don't want to reverse the cycle. They want to hurry it along.
Anya's sober, therefore an addict. Josie wears long sleeves because she doesn't want you to see the scars on her forearms. They're all damaged goods here.
Why else volunteer for this mission? This is the other equally ruinous reaction to existential dread. Self-sabotage, being passively destructive. And I think that this is the relatable component that the film is trying to weave into its plot. Like I said earlier, none of us can actually try to achieve immortality, so barring that, in the face of dealing with Oroboros firsthand, perhaps some of us are tempted to fast forward it instead of rewinding it, to dash willingly into the mouth of the snake. It's heavy stuff, clearly. But what's potentially confusing about Annihilation is how these dark undertones are contrasted by the chromatic, lush biome these women are traversing. In moments, it's beautiful here. Flowers of every breed are growing on the same vine. Animals are impossible cross-species fusions. There is a white alligator with shark teeth. There are strange deer with flowers growing in their antlers. There are plants that actively blossom in the shape of people somehow. Everything here grows as if a genetic randomizer has been applied. The horror in Annihilation is as effective as it is because it's innocent. It's evolution at a blistering pace that is indiscriminatory. Death is just as beautiful as it is horrific here. And to me, this is probably the most uniquely accurate portrayal of existential dread I've ever seen in science fiction, because knowing that you'll one day perish isn't always the gloomy part. It's knowing that the world will continue and flourish and be colorful without you. The knowledge that yes, you will one day push up daisies, but that those daisies will be gorgeous. That your great-great-great-granddaughter will not know you, but that genetically, she will have eyes that shine with the same luster yours did. There's a line toward the end where Dr. Ventress has an encounter with the source of the shimmer and says,
I don't know what it wants, or if it wants.
And I think this line sums up what makes Annihilation so terrifying or peaceful depending on your perspective. Death itself doesn't hate you. Sickness, cancer, infections, these things don't have malice, they just are. Time does not want to leave you old, wrinkly, and lonely. It simply does. How we respond to this determines our time in this world. You can try and fight it as Lena does. You can try to understand it as Ventress does, or you can simply accept it as Josie does. Annihilation is a fable about how we respond to the flaw that is our own impermanence, and perhaps an invitation to see that defect and the end that it brings as simply a new beginning. Is our eventual demise really a flaw? A line in the first Alien movie that really stuck with me was when they wake up Ash after he betrays the crew. Ash! If you haven't seen Alien, it's okay, you don't have to have seen it to get this. Ash is like David, he's a synthetic human, our creation. This is after the xenomorph has burst out of Kane and started wreaking havoc, and they ask Ash, how the heck do we kill this thing? To which he dryly replies, you can't. He goes on to say that it is unkillable and a perfect organism. When Lambert asserts that he admires the creature, Ash replies,
I admire its purity, a survivor, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality.
There is a certain flawlessness to the xenomorph, and perhaps, like us to David, like the hunters to the doll, like the womb to the babies, to Ash, it is like a god, an organism without the faults that cripple us, morality, mortality. To him, it is pure because, like the Shimmer, it simply is. But perhaps, like all of those obsessed with the divine that we've talked about today, he's missing the point entirely. In the second act of Routine, you find yourself in a research facility called the Ward that heavily predates the resort where you begin. And in a particularly disturbing email you find with the subject line, "Every ending is a new beginning," the founder of this research expedition, William Davis, says, "The time has finally come to answer the call. We are now ready to embark on our journey to research what beckoned us here, the canal." And what I find especially haunting about this email is that no matter how much you scour this game's footage and documents, there is never any clarification on what this call is. These people, I'm assuming in a privately funded expedition like the Prometheus, are simply here because something about this lunar cave beckoned them.
Soon the canal will speak.
I won't go into too many details here because I really think this game is worth unraveling on your own, but Routine has plenty of parallels with everything we've talked about today. There is a ton of imagery where nature is running in reverse. Like Prometheus, there are implications that perhaps the canal is the origin of humanity. There is even a nod to the creation of Adam toward the end. Like Uzumaki, people are drawn to the moon's womb. There is a record you can find where in December of 1977, someone wanders into the canal and never comes out. In early September of 1978, the crew has found evidence that something not quite human has crawled out and is hiding amongst them. Chills run down your spine and you realize that these events are roughly 9 months apart. Metaphors for pregnancy abound. Like Bloodborne and the doll, there is an allegory to artificial intelligence and our place as gods to these beings. There's a really creepy robotic fish that I clocked when I was wandering around the resort that just kept on looping. The knowledge that it would keep swimming long after the people of the resort are gone, again, just echoes that haunting knowledge that our creations will outlive us. It is a remarkably contemplative game when you aren't shitting your pants. But one way that I feel the story grounds itself in the face of all of this cosmic horror is in one of the final moments of the game. So yes, this will be a pretty big spoiler. Again, here is a timestamp. The thing you're hiding from in the second act, what the researchers label as Entity A, isn't the only life form to enter the ward. Entity B is this anatomically female counterpart to A. They find her corpse in this recording and she has passed from asphyxiation, choking on an apple. The Adam and Eve parallels are impossible not to pick up on. And you see in the vision that she and Entity A may have had a baby together. Are these visions how Entity A is trying to communicate with you? A log from William Davis seems to suggest that this happened to him too as he experienced a sadness that is not his own. Is that a hint of sympathy we feel toward this creature? And in the closing moments of the game, as you try to escape, it snatches you up, but this time, he's not trying to kill you. He looks at a monitor and then turns to you with a pleading look in his eyes. So you play the clip. He discards you and then longingly watches the video of his Eve. And as I sat there and observed this thing show emotion, I didn't find his action to be perfect. Unlike Ash, I didn't admire its purity. I admired its flaws. It's a moment that really doesn't need words to explain. It's like in Aliens when Ripley has Newt and they're slowly backing away from the Xenomorph Queen. She begins to call her children to attack, but then Ripley points the flamethrower down at the eggs, the newborns. This gives the Queen pause. She calls off her children, and Ripley respects it. She doesn't torch the eggs. Without a word, you can feel that from mother to mother there is an agreement here. But true to Ash's observation, there is no morality to these things. The Queen gets greedy, and Ripley lets her have it. Ash's perfection cost the Queen everything, and Ripley's flaw, the desire to place Newt's safety above her own, is what makes her a hero to us. This need to protect our children, our creations, despite how stupid or impractical it may be, is what separates us from the Shimmer, from the aliens, from monsters like Wayland, from the horrors of Uzumaki, from Mobius. We choose to endure through those we love. These moments of tragic horror cannot be as effective unless we feel the attachment between Koss and her orphan, between the baby necromorph and her mother, between Grace and Emily, between entities A and B, between Noah and Mio, between Ripley and Newt. Our morality and our place in this endless cycle necessitates that we continue through those we leave behind. Our fear is the flame of our impermanence, but our affection is the warmth. You were loved when you came into this world, and you will love others as you exit it, perhaps more than you love yourself. And that is a flaw, but one that connects you to everyone before you and everyone after in an endless loop. Love in every form is simply routine, an ongoing cycle of natural actions and patterns. Y'all, this script did not want to get written, holy moly. I have never wrestled with a script so much in my entire life. The message changed like 5 times, and I am just thrilled that it finally materialized. I hope you had fun with it, and I hope you felt something. As always, thank you so very much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more of my work, and let me know down below what media I should have talked about here, but didn't. And if you just can't get enough of these videos, consider supporting the show on Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get bonus content like bloopers, editing streams, creative input, and your name in the credits like you see here. A warm and cuddly thank you to this month's featured patrons. Ram7, Mooney Bears, Andy Pinland, Martin Mild, Kid, Dylan RJ51, Maja Solo, and Zach Esquez. Thanks again for watching, take care my friends, and have yourself a damn good one. Like a lot of you probably saw that section on Prometheus and was like, Daryl, you gotta play Liza P. How did you not talk about Liza P? Guess what? I am playing it for the first time ever over on Twitch every Thursday. Come talk to me. I really wish I had played it ahead of time though, because it would have fit perfectly in this.
What about babies? You guys got any babies?